What is up, harvesters? Welcome back to my subscribers. And if you're new here, my name is Ken. Welcome to Hobby Harvest. So today I want to talk to you guys about what seed to plant in your food plots. Now, spoiler alert, I can't specifically tell you what to plant in your specific food plot, but I can give you a broad oversight of what we think about when we plant. And I'll tell you what I plant both in my southeastern Wisconsin food plot and my northwestern Wisconsin food plot. So let's get into it. So first of all, the thing you want in your food plots is diversity. You do not want to plant just one seed type in your food plot unless you have a situation like I have in northwestern Wisconsin. So if you have the perfect situation, just like I do here in southeastern Wisconsin, where there's ag all over the place, the deer have all sorts of other food options. Even this time of year, it is early March. There's red osier dogwood all over out here. It is all nipped off right now. So they are even given those other food sources here as well. There's acorns, there's all of that. Year round, they have a whole bunch of options. So what I plant in my food plot down here is actually two strips. So even though the food plot is in the shape of like a boomerang, I take two lines through that entire boomerang and kind of split the food plot in half. And so what I want to do is get as many varieties of plant in that food plot that will be viable at different times of the season. So ideally, I want something to be popping right around, say, September when the season opens, something that's getting a little bit more popular in October, and then of course something that's starting to really pop in like November into December, and then ideally something that can carry that deer herd through the winter, keep as many calories and as many pounds on them throughout the winter so that I carry a healthier, larger deer herd into next season as well. So the other thing is we also have to think about prices. I've heard some guys have already been pricing their seed for this year, and it's pricey. Just like everything else, prices have gone up. The price to transport these things has gone up, and so those savings get passed on to you as the consumer. So what we can do to really cut down on our seed costs is to plant brassicas. Brassicas are by far the cheapest thing per acre to plant. And so my food plot down here in southeastern Wisconsin, half of it's brassicas every single year. Now you do want to rotate those. You can plant brassicas in the same area of a food plot 2 years in a row, but I just rotate every other year. Like I said, I split that food plot in half, so I just put the brassicas on one side and then the other. It also helps to kind of like till up the land. I do put some tillage radish in there with those brassicas, especially to fill in the bald spots after I plant that initial planting in August. And so that does really help to like till up the land in a more natural way without getting out there and like disking or tilling or plowing, because I do the no-till food plot method. So all I'm doing is just broadcasting seed down on the ground, smashing it in with, I actually use a lawn roller, pushes that seed into the ground and that seed comes up. But half of that food plot is brassicas because they're cheap to plant per acre. They're expensive when you look at them, but you're only putting down a very small amount per acre, where these other seeds that I'm going to get into, you're putting a lot more pounds per acre in. So what I do on the other half of my food plots though is I put in a forage soybean and a forage pea, and I dress that up with a nurse crop just so that they don't get buzzed off right when they're in their infancy, with whatever cereal grain is the cheapest. So we can do oats, we can do rye, we can do wheat, we can do whatever you can find for the cheapest. Use whatever's on sale. We just want that first bit of growth to come up with that cereal grain so that the deer buzz that off instead of buzzing off those peas and beans when they just pop out of the ground and are so delicious to the deer at that time. We just want to give them that little bit of cover by that cereal grain, and so we lightly seed that in just to give them that little bit of extra cover and for the deer to have something else to browse on that time of year when they're just coming out of the ground. Now, at any time, if any of these fail, all we have to do is throw down more cereal grain. That stuff will grow very quickly. It pops out of the ground in like a week if you have ideal situations. So what we want to do is just, fill in those bald spots as this gets growing, or just add to it if you feel like the deer are browsing it down too much. And we always talk about winter rye, especially in the northern part of the country, because that winter rye will stay viable a lot longer into the winter than any of those others like oats or wheat will, even though those two can grow into much cooler temperatures. But if you're down south, you don't have to worry so much about that winter rye. So That's a great setup for a food plot because those brassicas aren't going to become very desirable for the deer until late season and then through the winter. I can actually show you guys right now. They're starting to green up already. The deer have pretty much browsed them down to nothing, but now that most of our snow cover is gone, they are still there. There's still a little bit of food there. The deer are still browsing on them just a little bit, even though that red osier dogwood's great for them right now. They're really focused on that this time of year, but we have other stuff starting to green up now too. It's not quite spring green up. I wouldn't call it spring green up yet, but things like the mosses and stuff are starting to get a little bit more color in them right now, which means we're not far away from spring green up. But I would say it's at least probably a good month depending on how this season goes, because this has been just a weird winter. We've had very warm times and then very cold times, a ton of snow, and then it all melts, and it's just been a weird year this year. So we'll have to see how this spring goes. Maybe we're right around the corner. Maybe we got another month to go. It's really hard to say at this point, but you just have to keep an eye on it and watch it and see what's going on as far as when we can do all of those things that we need to do at spring green up. But get back to the food plots in this video. So the other thing is, like up north on my northwestern Wisconsin food plot, I've tried to establish brassicas up there. I've tried to establish peas and beans up there, and they get growing, but the deer herd buzz them down to nothing. And so the problem up there is that there's no ag anywhere. Those deer are miles from the nearest ag field. And so many of them, especially those does and fawns, don't see ag at any point in their entire life. So I put in a food plot, and it's the mecca of food attraction within miles of anything. And so we see some very successful hunts on that property because of that. But it makes you scratch your head when you're trying to get these nice food plots established. So the solution is you just put in a cereal grain. You can just keep layering that as they buzz it down, meaning just keep seeding back into it as they buzz it down to keep a viable food source for them. Because even though a cereal grain, just like pure cereal grain food plot down here in southeastern Wisconsin wouldn't actually be that attractive to the deer herd, because the next available natural food source in that northwestern big woods setting is so much lower than their other options here. It doesn't have to be a good food plot, it just has to be a food plot, and it is the dominant food attraction in the area. Every deer is going to come check it out. We have all sorts of opportunity at harvesting what we want on that property. We've had great success of hunts the last however many years since we've really gotten these food plots dialed in up there, but that was really a learning experience. I would 100% focus on winter rye on that property from this point forward. Maybe if I get some time and I can open up more of the woods up there and get some more acres of food plots in, I'm sure I'm gonna play around and experiment with some more stuff just so I can bring it to you guys here on the channel. But the easiest thing is just winter rye up there. It's gonna get those deer in, they're gonna eat on that. But you have to layer it, so you do have to like reseed every like 2 or 3 weeks if they are buzzing it down, because you need to keep that stand going into the hunting season. And so that gets a little challenging. Although when you are planting winter rye like that, you can start a lot later. So we plant our normal food plots anywhere from like the beginning to middle of August typically. So I would focus on the beginning of August in northwestern Wisconsin. I would focus on like middle of August here in southeastern Wisconsin. And then of course, if you're further south, you can get a little bit later plant date going. But in northwestern Wisconsin, if I'm gonna do cereal rye, all I have to do is plant in like September. Like I can plant 2 weeks before bow opener, and that's fine. I don't have to keep a stand of it going like all summer long. Remember, when we're planting food plots, we are focused on the hunt. We are not focused on harvesting these crops. So we actually want these crops to be a lot younger when they're a lot more desirable to the deer herd than what like an ag field would be more mature and like starting to dry out, and it's at the end of its life cycle during the hunting season, and they're still of course attractive to the deer herd, but we want that nice young growth at the time of the season, because that is how we make it that #1 food source in the area. That's how we get those deer in there. So the other thing I didn't mention is obviously get your soil right, get that sunlight down to those food plots, do everything you can to make sure that that soil is great for what you're trying to grow. Also, you can work out with your local co-op, your local feed and seed. They'll help you out with that stuff if you aren't quite sure what you're doing, but just make sure you have everything perfect for what you're planting. but I love diversity. So like I said, I'm planting a variety of brassicas. There's a whole bunch of different ones. There's purple top turnip, there's kale in there, there's tillage radish in there, there's a whole bunch of other stuff, radishes and whatever else in there. And then on the other side, I'm planting those peas, those beans, those cereal grains. So I have so many different things in that food plot. So many different things can be the one thing the deer really love to chew on that specific week or that couple of weeks. And then as they fade away, something else in the food plot takes off and they love chewing on that. So that is just something you're trying to do when you do have a lot of other food competition in the area, like either neighbors who are putting in food plots or egg fields or whatever. Now, in my northwestern Wisconsin food plot, again, I can plant anything and it will be the #1 food source. You're just trying to be the #1 food source, and this is how we do it depending on what kind of area you're in. If you guys enjoyed this video, YouTube thinks you'll really enjoy this one too, so go check it out and see if they're right. And I'll catch you guys on the next one.